Copy, we're searching that area now.
The Arizona desert, 35,000 square miles of some of the most hostile terrain on Earth.
We got something moving down there.
Yeah, right there. I should be able to pick him up.
Out here, you might be able to run, but you definitely can't hide. Especially with the law on your tail.
Okay, yeah, we got the laser on him.
I'm being hunted as part of a training exercise with U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
I don't know how long I can stay hidden out here.
If we can't get him to run, we'll get the helicopter. We got positive contact on that.
All right, that's not a comfortable feeling.
It looks as though my fugitive days are just about over.
You're 20 feet on that left.
Stop, fellow agents, give me your hand!
Oh my God, there's nowhere I can go.
Give me your hand!
Oh, all right.
I'm Josh Klein, technology consultant and innovation specialist. And I've just been found by one of the most sophisticated surveillance tools money can buy. The Predator Unmanned Aerial Vehicle, or UAV. With a range of over 3,000 miles and the ability to remain airborne for 21 hours, the Predator is the ultimate spy in the sky. Helped, of course, by the fact that its pilot never has to leave the ground.
The Predator is a flying machine like no other. But the real secret of its awesome capability lies with one crucial technology.
A technology nearly 2,000 years in the making.
Welcome to the Link.
Understanding how everything around us came to be is like piecing together the ultimate puzzle. Because behind every invention, there's always a backstory, featuring brilliant minds, great civilizations, and extraordinary breakthroughs, all linking together to create the world we live in. The first link in our story of what makes the Predator UAV the perfect hunter takes us back over 2,000 years to what is now China, where a new type of weapon is about to change the course of history. I've come to the city of Xi'an to experience the ancient art of wushu.
In Wushu, a warrior is trained to see his weapon as an extension of his body, making for a deadly combination.
Wushu's origins stretch back thousands of years to a time when China was being ripped apart by civil war.
By 3rd century BC, this violence is at its peak. The region is split into small competing kingdoms ruled by violent warlords, all vying for supremacy.
But this age of chaos is about to come to an end, thanks to one man and a revolution in military technology. It's 227 BC, and in an ancient world blitzkrieg, the army of King Yingzheng has its enemies on the run. In desperation, they send an assassin to kill him. But legend has it that before the assassin can strike, Yingzheng cuts him down with a new and revolutionary type of sword. To learn more about this legendary blade, I've come to Yingzheng's tomb. Guarded by the massed ranks of his terracotta army.
The scale is phenomenal. The level of detail in every single one of these statues is completely mind-blowing. But I'm not here to wonder at Yingzhung's crack troops. What I'm really interested in is what archaeologists have found in the hands of these clay warriors.
Magnificent bronze swords.
Wow, so this is a genuine sword from the Qin dynasty.
Yes.
And this is what they would use, they'd go into battle with this.
Yes. The warrior is not a real person, but the weapon is real.
That's fantastic. How many of these have you found?
Less than 10 swords.
That you
not
found?
Not so many.
So why are there so few of these swords?
Because it's a useful weapon, so people robbed the tomb for the battle. Yeah,
So they were good, so now there's none left because everyone took them.
yeah.
Okay.
So what was it that made these weapons so highly prized? To get some idea, I've come to a busy Chinese foundry.
Time to cast a sword.
Even today, working with bronze is notoriously difficult.
Okay, that's really hot. I can feel it on my eyeballs.
Get any part of the process wrong, and your metal can end up either too soft or too brittle. Not what you want in any metal object, least of all a sword. Which is why King Yingzheng commissioned his best metallurgists to search for a new bronze formula.
The terracotta army swords are special because the Qin armorers use a complex method to mix hard and soft bronze into one weapon.
The result? A bronze sword that combined both strength and flexibility, which gave it one crucial advantage. It could be made up to 30% longer without shattering, which was pretty handy in a fight.
The best way to kill with a sword isn't to slash, but to stab. And what a long sword lets you do is stab from a greater distance. Now, even if I was twice the swordsman that I am, I wouldn't have stood a chance against Jun Zhaohao, who was able to deliver his fatal blow before I even got close. In the hands of the Qin army, these blades changed the course of history.
By exploiting this revolutionary breakthrough in weapon design, the Qin were able to defeat their enemies one by one and forge a new nation, united under the Qin name. China. With peace and unification, the Chinese could now turn their attention to other pursuits, like making money. Over the next few hundred years, their economy boomed, thanks in part to a unique Chinese wonder product.
It all begins with the cocoon of a caterpillar. It's not much to look at, but out of this will come something beautiful.
These workers are practicing a Chinese craft that's been around since 2700 BC. That makes it older than the Great Pyramids at Giza. Here we are with our little friends, the cocoons. Now, what's fascinating is that when you put them in hot water, they begin to soften,
allowing them to be unraveled to form one long filament.
Now, when these fibers are spun together, they combine to form one of antiquity's wonder products, what the Chinese call xijiao, and we call silk.
When woven, silk can be turned into cloth with amazing properties.
Once you handle it, you begin to understand why silk is so highly prized. Not only is it beautiful to look at, but it's warm, it's strong, and above all, it's light, which means it's cheap to transport.
China knew that in silk, it had a technology worth protecting.
So the Chinese effectively create a patent on their silk technology, an old-fashioned kind of patent. You know the kind of thing. You tell anyone our secrets, we'll hunt you down and kill you.
With a virtual monopoly on its manufacture and a domestic market full to overflowing, the Chinese began to export their silk abroad.
By 1st century AD, silk has reached the edge of the Roman Empire, and demand for silk togas goes through the roof. For the first time, trade binds east with west. This is the birth of the Silk Road.
Misleadingly, the Silk Road was in fact a whole network of land and sea routes connecting Asia to the west, helping to make China even richer. But also, because money and innovation nearly always go hand in hand, a world leader in new technology.
Ancient China isn't just making stuff, it's inventing it. And not just silk. The wheelbarrow, pedal loom, paper money, gunpowder, all of them Chinese inventions.
But those same trade routes that helped make China so wealthy were also about to be her undoing.
You see, just as the appearance of the Silk Road leads to an export of Chinese luxuries, so too does it trigger an exodus of Chinese technologies, turning it, if you like, into a kind of early information highway, spreading knowledge across the globe. Knowledge which would lead to the rise of the West.
One of the most important examples of the kind of technology transfer that took place between China and the West was an invention so small it could fit in the palm of your hand. And yet, it would go on to save countless thousands of lives.
Seafaring in the Middle Ages was risky business. Without accurate maps and out of sight of land, the only way to navigate is using the sun during the day or the stars at night. But if the weather turns bad, or even just cloudy, well, then you're in big trouble.
But around 1200 AD, a Chinese invention reached Europe that changed everything.
Now, you probably remember this from school. Basically, you take an iron rod or a needle and a lodestone or a magnetic rock. You rub the needle on the rock, stick it through a bit of cork, drop it in a pool of water. It's a compass. Now, it was only really used by the Chinese for feng shui, and they used it to align their buildings to ensure prosperity.
In fact, it would be about 1,000 years before some smart guy thought of putting one on a boat, thus inventing the ship's compass. "24 hours a day, whatever the weather, a compass will always point north." allowing ships like this classic Dutch barge to keep to the straight and narrow.
It's like a piece of pie. This is your course. And here you make a small mistake. You go to starboard. And here it's not much distance. But after a couple of hours, days, the effect is huge.
You're way off.
You're way off. You're in a complete different continent.
So I guess it is sort of the most critical thing. Otherwise, you could be lost for days or...
Yeah, that's right. In the old days, we had a lot of punishments for the guy who was steering when he was off course.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, hanging on the mast. And when he was very bad, overboard with him. He's gone, and we take a new one.
Just replace them entirely?
Yeah.
So what made the compass so revolutionary?
With this tool, you could stay on course all the time. You get your same bearing. It really changed everything. Now they could sail over the world without going in circles.
Bit by bit, European sailors began to improve the compass. First, ditching the water. Then, mounting them on gimbals. Before long, Western compasses were the most accurate in the world.
By the 15th century, the European compass was revolutionizing seafaring. Oh my God. Allowing travelers to go to literally uncharted territory. It was the kind of time when a sharp pair of eyes up in the crow's nest was able to spy new coastlines, even new continents. It was truly the age of discovery.
So where have we got up to? We started with the invention of the Chinese longsword that helped unify China, and with it, the growth of the Silk Road, along which many technologies, notably the ship's compass, found their way to Europe.
Now, with the appearance of new sea trade routes, it'd be safe to assume that there'd be a sudden mad rush to capitalize on all the new markets. And in a way, that was true. But there was also a problem.
This is the Port of Rotterdam in Holland, Europe's largest container terminal. Every day, it handles some 20,000 containers, carrying goods worth a combined total of about $400 million. But 400 years ago, investing in international trade was a much riskier proposition than it is today.
You see, maritime trade is expensive business. Take these ships here. Each one of them costs a small fortune to build, crew, equip, and fuel. Expensive today, but no less expensive in the 16th century.
Even with the compass, an incredible 1 in 3 long-distance voyages still never made it back. And for potential investors, that just didn't make financial sense. So to reduce the risk of maritime trade, people turned to a simple but ingenious invention.
This new invention isn't mechanical, it's financial. It's all down to some enterprising Dutchman and a revolutionary piece of paper.
It was one of these. This is a replica of a document made out to Mr. Dirk Peters, a Dutch road builder, an investor in the newly formed Dutch East India Company, whose headquarters were built in 1606, right here in Amsterdam. While strictly speaking, this is a receipt for 600 guilders, it's in fact much, much more. You see, what this promises Mr. Peters is part ownership of the company, meaning that what this really is a copy of the world's first share certificate.
A revolutionary concept that helped to reduce the financial risk of international trade by spreading that risk more widely.
But here's the clever thing about shares. Rather than tying up their wealth, investors like Dirk are able to realize their cash at any time
by selling their shares on to others. This radical financial flexibility makes shares enormously popular, creating the very first stock exchange. And all this while Wall Street is just a glimmer in some future banker's eye.
The humble share allowed the Dutch to dominate global trade for more than 100 years, turning tiny Holland into the economic powerhouse of Europe. But more importantly for our story, the new technology capital of the world.
Our story of the technology at the heart of the predator drone has reached 17th century Holland, where a simple financial innovation has allowed the Dutch to create one of the richest, most vibrant societies in the world.
Like modern America, Holland was now a can-do kind of place. A melting pot of new ideas and new technology.
One of the technologies that was receiving a lot of attention was this, the lens.
And it was about to inspire one 17th century Dutchman to invent a powerful new tool. Antony van Leeuwenhoek is a rich cloth merchant, and thanks to the magnifying glasses he uses to inspect the quality of his cloth, a man with a fascination for lenses. Convinced that he can make a lens of even greater power, Antony learns the art of lens grinding and develops what's regarded by many as the first practical microscope. To learn more about this microscope, I've come to a museum specializing in the history of science and medicine.
Other people were also working on microscopes at the time, but van Leeuwenhoek was the first one to come up with this type of single microscope. Here we have an example. It's a very small, tiny lens. Right. You can see it's really, really small. And there's a little pin where you can put the, well, whatever you want to look at. Mm-hmm. A little flea, for example. And then you keep it very close to your eye. And then you can adjust using these screws. And then van Leeuwenhoek was able to see many things.
Most early microscopes had two lenses, but van Leeuwenhoek's had just one, a tiny sphere of glass made using a secret grinding technique that he never revealed, giving his microscopes roughly 10 times the power of their predecessors.
Oh yeah, you really can see something. It's kind of amazing.
He put everything under his microscope. You name it, and he did it. And this is how he saw, for the first time, sperm cells, blood cells, fleas, animals, all kinds of things. He saw so many things that others didn't see.
But van Leeuwenhoek's greatest discovery came about purely by accident. One of the many exotic new spices appearing on Dutch dinner tables at the time is pepper. And for van Leeuwenhoek, discovering what causes its fiery taste becomes something of an obsession. But when he puts some under his new microscope, he's shocked to find a swarming sea of microscopic life.
This was an incredible moment. This was the very first time that anyone had ever seen these microorganisms, creatures which are fundamental to our understanding of biology and medicine, creatures which we now call bacteria.
Van Leeuwenhoek called these tiny organisms animalcules. But far from kick-starting a 17th century medical revolution, their discovery passed by almost unnoticed.
You see, the discovery of bacteria is a classic example of a breakthrough that's years ahead of its time.
In fact, it would be almost 200 years before new scientific research revealed the true significance of these microorganisms.
The research is motivated not by mankind's desire for medicine, but by their need for a good stiff drink.
Our story picks up in the 19th century, during the height of the Industrial Revolution, when America was going nuts for the railroad. By the mid-century, the train was changing the way everybody did business.
You see, the train doesn't just make it easy for you to visit your Aunt Marge in Wyoming. Huge quantities of goods can now be transported great distances at very low cost, meaning that for the first time, manufacturers are having a field day. But for one industry, the tantalizing prospect of expanding into new markets is offset by a fundamental problem, making their product last long enough to reach its destination.
This is the St. Louis headquarters of Anheuser-Busch, named after its founder, brewing pioneer Adolphus Busch. Every day, this one factory alone produces the equivalent of just over 14 million bottles of beer. That's enough Bud to fill 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
But back in 1860, breweries like these face a major obstacle to production. Their beer can only be transported short distances. Now that was because it goes sour, and nobody knows why. Well, you remember Van Leeuwenhoek and his little animalcules? Well, after 200 years of being ignored, their moment has come.
So far, our story of the crucial technological links leading up to the Predator drone has featured a stream of innovations that have changed the world. We've seen how the invention of the bronze longsword helped stimulate Chinese commerce and the growth of the Silk Road, along which technologies like the ship's compass came to Europe, leading to new trade routes and the invention of the share certificate, which created the wealth for Holland to bring us the single-lens microscope, the invention behind the groundbreaking discovery of bacteria. A discovery which was now about to transform the world of industrial brewing. Having wrestled for years with the problem of how to prolong the life of his beer, Adolphus Busch reads of a recent scientific breakthrough by a French chemist who, only a few years earlier, had been tasked with solving this very problem. That chemist's name is Louis Pasteur. Pasteur had earlier discovered that the secret to making alcohol lay with the behavior of a particular microorganism.
Whoa. Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeast.
Oh, sorry. Wow, it's kind of warm.
Yeah.
So this plays a role in making beer.
That's right. This is probably the most important ingredient to making beer. Without yeast, you wouldn't have beer. For the longest time, we had no idea what it was. When the Egyptians came up with beer over, 4,000 BC, 5,000 BC, they didn't even realize what they were dealing with. They knew they had something that created beer, but they really didn't know what it was. And really, it's not till recent history that we've really found out what yeast is.
It was Pasteur who worked out that yeast's crucial role in the fermentation process was precisely because it was a living organism.
So what's this?
That's beer and its making. So when we talk about yeast being alive, we're sitting next to, a huge living mass right here. So it's growing, it's breathing, it's eating. It's basically, it's my pet. I have to make it grow, I have to make it happy, I've got to give it the right nutrients.
And in exchange, it gives you beer.
That's exactly right.
And what's it eating?
So it's eating the sugars that we made up in the brew house. So we have fermentable sugars. The yeast is taking those fermentable sugars, breaking them down, consuming them, and then producing alcohol and CO2.
So it eats up the sugar, and then it burps CO2 and pees alcohol.
Yeah, in a weird sort of way. That's a good way to look at it, I guess.
That's pretty amazing.
Pasteur's next breakthrough comes with the discovery that the reason why alcohol sours so easily is down to some other microbes. And that these acid-producing microorganisms are bacteria. Now that he understood the problem of why alcohol had a habit of turning sour, Pasteur set about finding a solution.
Knowing that bugs don't like heat, Pasteur suggested heating the liquid to 140 degrees. Hot enough to kill most of the bacteria, but not kill the flavor.
A process that became known as pasteurization.
When most people think of pasteurization, you think of milk, right? But in fact, it was invented for hooch.
For Anheuser-Busch, the first company in the US to adopt pasteurization, the new technology was a godsend, extending the shelf life of its beer long enough to ship it nationwide. But this created another problem: how to keep up with the new demand.
All right.
Deep beneath the streets of St. Louis lies a labyrinth of cool limestone caves that once played an important role in the brewing process.
Let me get the light.
Whoa. Wow, this is huge. Oh, this is really eerie.
A lot of brewers came to St. Louis because of the limestone caves. By the 1860s, we had 57 breweries here in the city of St. Louis, which is a huge, huge number.
Wow, in one town?
Yes, exactly.
So why store beer in a cave?
Well, you needed to store beer in a cave because lager yeast is a very temperamental yeast, and it requires to be stored in a cool area. So these natural form caves were a great environment for that to happen.
Were these caves the perfect temperature then?
Not necessarily. They had to bring ice in from other areas. The ice would really refrigerate the content of the cave for quite a long period of time.
So they could make as much beer as they wanted?
Well, they could only fill so much beer down here. Once they hit their capacity, the brewers really had to start looking outside of beer caves. When it's 95 degrees outside in the city of St. Louis, you're going to be sweating and your ice is going to melt very quickly.
So what Adolphus Busch and other beer producers decide they need is a much cheaper and more efficient way to keep their beer cool.
I've traveled north to a frozen spot in the outskirts of Ottawa, in Canada. It's just the sort of spot that North American brewers would have ordered their ice from. It's so cold, my nose hairs are crackling and the front of my eyes keep freezing over if I don't blink often enough. I think it's probably about enough for me at this point. Guys, I'm coming out.
Okay, so this isn't really a frozen wasteland. It's the National Research Council of Canada's climatic testing facility, where scientists can create temperatures as low as minus 40 degrees at the simple touch of a button. The reason I'm here is that the technology behind this place is more or less the same as that invented some 120 years ago to solve the brewing industry's storage problem.
So how does this fridge help us understand what you guys do in this building?
Well, it uses a gas called a refrigerant and a compressor.
Okay, I assume it compresses the gas.
It compresses the gas, and then when that gas re-expands, it actually gets cold. And we can use that property to suck heat out of the inside of the refrigerator and dump that heat out the back of the refrigerator.
So it's basically just going into the fridge, taking any heat that's in the fridge, and then dumping it back out here.
That's
which
right.
is why the back of your fridge is always warm.
That's right. The cooled gas then goes back to the compressor where it's crunched back up again and then sent back inside the refrigerator where it expands and the cycle just continues.
Artificial refrigeration solved the brewers' supply problem by allowing them to store beer at the right temperature, whatever the weather. And once again, Adolphus Busch was the first to spot its potential.
Just as with pasteurization, Busch was the first American brewer to install artificial refrigeration, letting him get a leg up on his rivals and capture the taste buds of a nation.
But in their search for even more effective refrigerants, the scientists and engineers were now about to discover how low you could go.
For the first time, scientists were able to challenge themselves to reach ever lower temperatures, creating new and unique substances that would one day open the way to the stars.
With the invention of large-scale artificial refrigeration in the late 19th century, attention switched to creating refrigerants with even lower temperatures, resulting in some incredible liquids that would go on to shape the future of every human being on Earth.
Now this may look like strange gear for a picnic, but bear with me. I'm here to celebrate the arrival on Earth of some magical liquids. Liquids with temperatures so extreme that in the 19th century, the thermos flask was invented just to store them. Let me introduce you to liquid nitrogen and liquid oxygen, distilled out of thin air by 19th century scientists using the same technology as the brewers' artificial refrigeration machines. So I'm going to show you what the extreme cold of liquid nitrogen can do. Whoa. Okay, good. Wow, can you hear that? All right, let's see how cold it really got. Wow, it's like it's made out of glass or sugar or something. It's not a flour anymore, that's for sure. That is frozen solid.
Now, flash freezing is one thing, but liquid oxygen has even more impressive properties.
So I thought I'd demonstrate this by having us a little barbecue. And here we got a nice steak. Oh, that's a good sound. All right, so that's starting to cook nicely. Now, let's add a little heat in the traditional way, using the bellows to blow some oxygen across the coals. Now, that's starting to get a little hotter. But given that I'm the lazy type, let's see what happens when we add some concentrated liquid oxygen. This is where the suit comes in handy. All right, gentlemen, let's see what this can do.
You see, liquefied gases aren't just cold, they're also incredibly concentrated. In fact, liquid oxygen contains 4,000 times the level of O2 found in ordinary air. Which means that when you combine it with a fuel, you end up with one incredibly combustible mix.
All right, liquid oxygen, meat barbecue. Woo! Ho-ho! Wow, that is hot. Holy moly. It burned a hole right through the bottom. Totally fried the tire. Steak's still cooking though. Holy mackerel. Wow, so that is an amazing example of the combustive power of concentrated liquid oxygen. Yeah, if you like it well done, I guess that's the way to do it. It's gonna cost you a barbecue though.
By the 20th century, the jaw-dropping potential of liquid oxygen had been harnessed to create a groundbreaking new technology.
The oxyacetylene torch.
Igniting a mixture of acetylene gas and liquid oxygen gives you a flame roughly 50% hotter than acetylene in air. A flame that can cut steel. The oxyacetylene torch revolutionized construction in the 20th century, helping to shape the skyline of many of our modern cities. And yet, this cutting-edge tool isn't our next technology.
You see, the thing about liquid oxygen is, when you combine it with a powerful fuel, you can really take off.
It's 1924, and on the streets of Berlin, a 12-year-old boy, his head full of recent German land speed records, is about to launch his very own rocket car. In reality, a toy cart attached to a bunch of fireworks. While the stunt earns him a visit to the local police station, it doesn't put him off dreaming of further glory. That boy's name was Wernher von Braun, who, as the future head of Nazi Germany's rocket program, would be the man to finally unleash the full potential of liquid gases. Propelled by a mixture of liquid oxygen and ethanol, the V-2 rocket was the world's first ballistic missile. Whose development marked not only a new and deadly phase of the war, but also the birth of the space age. By the 1950s, the American rocket program was in full swing. Developed with the help of the former Nazi scientist Wernher von Braun, rocket power propelled American astronauts to ever greater heights.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Culminating in the very first flight to the moon.
The Eagle has landed. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
But it's another type of payload, also dependent on the rocket, that we're more interested in.
One that takes me directly to that spy in the sky we started with, the Predator.
At a cost of around $10 million each, the Predator unmanned aerial vehicle is about as high-tech as surveillance gets.
So, what advantages does an unmanned aircraft give you in conducting surveillance?
Well, one of them is the efficiency of the airplane. A similar manned airplane for the same fuel load, I could get 3.5 hours of flight. And this airplane's 21 hours. With that kind of persistent surveillance or unblinking stare, we can watch a subject over a period of almost a full calendar day.
But for its pilot to remain on the ground, the Predator is entirely dependent on the quality of its communications. Using ground-based radio control alone would limit the Predator's range to line of sight, roughly 125 miles, and even less in mountainous terrain. So to get around this, the Predator relies on one crucial piece of technology that only a rocket can deliver.
It's the communications satellite. So what's the range on the Predator?
We can fly the airplane anywhere in the world that satellite footprint falls, which for the subscription we use is, Canadian border down to almost Central America.
So as long as you have a satellite that covers that footprint, you could go anywhere in the globe?
Correct. We can control it anywhere, almost anywhere on the face of the Earth.
So is this a big game changer in the world of surveillance?
It is. The endurance and the power of this airplane, that unblinking stare, that persistent surveillance, it cannot be equaled by manned aircraft currently.
The communication satellite is the final link in our story, the final link in the epic chain of historic innovations that made the Predator possible.
But how did we get here? We began with the bronze longswords that unified China and helped develop the Silk Road, along which the ship's compass found its way to Europe. This led to new trade routes and the invention of share certificates, which in turn created the wealth that brought us the single-lens microscope and the discovery of bacteria, a breakthrough that led to the invention of pasteurization, for a brewing industry also behind the development of artificial refrigeration, the technology that gave us liquid fuels, which provided the propulsion for rockets to deliver into space the first satellites.
But this story isn't over, because technology is constantly spawning new links.
Right now, more than 3,000 satellites are in orbit above our planet, controlling countless everyday tasks, from navigation and weather forecasting to the transmission of the pictures on your TV.
And in the future, they might prove the difference between the life and death of the human race. Because as the global population hits 7 billion, mankind faces immense challenges.
Reserves of oil, gas, even water have never been under greater strain. But satellites might just hold the answer.
Satellite imagers have now been developed that can peer deep into the Earth in search of underground water resources and seams in the rock rich in oil and gas. Satellites have also been developed to help farmers figure out exactly how much fertilizer to use to produce bumper crops year after year.
We stand at the beginning of a new age of space technology, one that promises to change the lives of billions.
Today's new technologies will become stepping stones to tomorrow's breakthroughs. Breakthroughs which will redefine our world. And if the surprising links in this story are any guide, we have no idea what's coming next.